Hi, everybody. I am Pastor Kate Ryer-Welton, and I have the honor of serving as your campus pastor, your Lutheran campus pastor at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. Thank you so much for welcoming students into your pulpits today for LCM Sunday. It's one of our most energizing days of the year, particularly when we're out in the Minneapolis and St. Paul area synods. And so we're really grateful for your hospitality. The very good news is that we have preachers in 11 congregations this year. I think that is the most that we've ever had, and we're so grateful to you for hosting these students. The challenge, of course, is that there were also congregations who wanted adult forums, and I can't be everywhere on this morning. And so we are doing what we learned how to do during the pandemic and making a little video. So I can do a part, but then the students and board members can really fill this out for you. As the pastor of this ministry, it's my call and my delight, really, to get to interpret this ministry. And so I'm kind of sad that I can't be with you, but I hope that I can come again another time so we can have a conversation about all of this. It's one of my favorite parts, in part because I love to tell the story about how over 40 students tromp across the snow and the cold in the dead of winter simply to go to church on Wednesday night, to be community with one another, to explore what it means to live deeply into Christian community and life, and to discern together how to live their faith in their daily lives and how to put it in practice kind of collectively too. God is certainly up to something on campus, and I believe in the world. And I become a bit frustrated when we perseverate about the church dying, because what I see on campus is a shifting church, a changing church, but a church that is brimming with new life, even after the pandemic. So even though there's been changes between our community now and our community of the past, it's been interesting to me how we, LCM, remain shaped by these three faithful expressions that students, it must have been, 8 or 10 years ago now, students who maybe saw farther into the future than I could at that moment, talked about being curious, being real, and being community. I feel like all of these have since kind of come into conversation in faith formation conversations and just in thinking about who and how we want to be together as a culture. But we're just going to talk about LCM. We're not going to talk about all of that. They found these as a way to describe how our ministry in particular speaks gospel into both the joy and the excitement and the heaviness and the anxiety of campus life. And so with that intro, I'm just going to dive in. I'm going to walk you through this, and then I'm going to invite students to share stories about ways that they've been shaped by these expressions. Then you can ask them questions. So first, we're going to talk about curiosity, being curious, and I think it's helpful, particularly for this one, to know a bit about campus life. The university's motto is driven to discover, right? So you may have seen that on a billboard, at least it is for now. And so it's essential that we as a church, a Christian community on campus, provide space for students to explore their faith and really meet them in the big questions that are coming up in their studies. It's also true that religious dialogue on campus is shaped by a very black and white way of looking at the world and thinking about what faith and spirituality is. So these two things kind of live adjacent to one another. The first is the secular nature of the university, right? It is not Gustavus or Luther College or St. Thomas. It's a secular land-grant institution, and that means that spirituality and faith are become more privatized. They're not as kind of institutionally integrated as they might be in other spaces. And the net result of that at the University of Minnesota is they're sort of ignored or misunderstood as a component of the student experience and really one's lived experience. So it's a very privatized environment. And I think because of the secular nature of the university, there's a heavy investment by non-denominational, more conservative Christian groups onto that campus. And they present and are grounded in a more exclusive, black and white, kind of in and out theology, where if you have questions, there are answers. And a part of being discipled and growing in faith is kind of learning those answers and learning how to teach those to other people. And we just have a different way of going about faith formation with our students and even exploring what it means to be a Christian community. So nurturing and embodying a practice of curiosity actually feels like an essential characteristic of our particular campus ministry. And I actually wonder if it might not be true for any church in the 21st century. We engage scripture as a living document. We tease around in the gray areas of theology. We tell a lot of stories together. And within and outside of worship, we lift up the role of humility, of awe, of mystery, of creativity in the life of faith. And that's really fun for me. We also encourage students to explore their vocations, of course, and their identities, which they're really doing at this point in their lives anyway. But we push them a little farther than the university or the leadership minor might and wonder with them what God might be up to in the midst of that exploration, that discovery, that unfolding that happens so beautifully in the college years. And so in leadership trainings and through retreats and speaker series, our students get to learn more about their values and their spiritual types, and then really wonder what it means to show up as a neighbor, as a family member, as a friend. We talk a lot about it's important what you do in the world, but it's also important who you are. So we say, you're not only human being, or you're not only human doings, you're also a human being. So who are you called to be in this world? And then how does that find expression in the things that you do and the ways that you show up professionally, in your neighborhood, in your families? So that's curiosity. Our second expression is be real. Of course, I feel like this age demographic has valued authenticity throughout time. There's nothing unique about 18 to 24-year-olds really wanting to be true to who they are and wanting their values to be in alignment with their politics, the ways they're living their life. It's a challenge, but that idealism, right, is there. And so there's nothing new for Gen Z about that reality. I think one of the layers of this is that there's a culture of performance now. We could talk about that for a whole hour, about where that comes from, but it leads to high amounts of anxiety and stress, right? They are performing all of the time, and they sometimes don't know how to turn it off. So whether they're in their classrooms with their professors who have to write them a recommendation so they can move on to the next chapter, whether they're in dorm rooms, whether they're on social media. Some students even experience with their families, whether the families know it or not or want it or not, they are very worried about disappointing you. Students, so they need a place where they can shut that off, and also where they can name the things that are broken in our world. I think we'll talk about mental health in a bit. There's much to do about this. But the world is a really volatile place right now. In some ways it always has been, but we know a lot more about how volatile it is now. And they are shouldering that. And I think to provide a space where we can name, like, this is a bit of a mess, and hear that God's love is for you and that the Spirit is active in you and that you are called out into it can be a really important and grounding thing. So the other thing, I'm doing some theology right now, but at the end of each sermon, I remind them of their belovedness. So this counters some of that performance. So of kind of God's grace, the nothing you can do to earn it, right, nature of our faith. So it's very countercultural. And to hear that you are beloved before or beyond anything you do or don't do, even if I made a great call to action, right, that God's love is there for them, whether they do or don't do that, is a very countercultural move and very grounding. And I think that's why students come to church. Also, we have great music, but that's a message they're not hearing many other places. So, what should I say? Oh, mental illness it's important to talk about mental illness here. It can make this part of our ministry kind of hard to balance if a lot of people are really struggling with their mental health. We're a smaller community, 40 to 50 people. And so if a lot of people are struggling, that impacts kind of how we're able to show up. And so it's been interesting to watch leaders in the last several years start talking openly and honestly about when they need to ask for help and really asking for it. And then when they have energy to give, stepping up and naming, like, I have some energy this week, recognizing that we're not all tired all of the time. And this has been very surprising to me and really helpful to me in my own life. So I'm so grateful for them. The last thing is about community. This is, of course, a campus of 55,000 students who are disparate and fragmented. There is a loneliness epidemic, which has been well documented. And if you're not aware of it, shoot me an email and I'll get you links to lots of resources. But for our students, community, the love of Christ, the warmth and welcome that they experience within this Christian community is the one thing that they will report as being transformational. So I think it is imperative that we not underestimate the value of simply gathering in a gospel-centered community, which is rooted in God's unconditional love for the world, for the neighborhood, for the campus, and for each of us as individuals. So with that, I'm going to sign off. Again, I would love to come and talk to you a little bit more about this if you are curious, and I look forward to hearing what the students share and the board members share about their experience with this ministry. Thank you again, and we'll talk soon.